we are live, ladies and gentlemen, doing a Substack live. I'm Matt Lewis. I'm here with Ron Fournier. He is a consultant and veteran journalist and a friend. He's a Detroit Tigers fan. Ron Fournier, how are you?
I'm doing great. Living a dream back home here in Michigan. Glad I'm not in DC anymore.
Indeed. I will remember going to see the Tigers and the Orioles with you at Camden Yards. And you know what? We got on Morning Joe, I think, actually put up a picture of us at that game.
We
So
did. I forgot about that part. I sure remember the game with Joe Trippi and Ginny Terzano, two good friends of ours. It was a wonderful time.
we had a good time.
Mm,
Things are not good right now. I mean, for you and me, they are probably. We
mm.
have not yet been sent off to El Salvador or
We
get
could be
no.
next.
But we could be next.
Mm.
Yeah, I want to talk to you about this, right? So, like, Trump is obviously, there was a 9-0 unanimous Supreme Court decision. So that means like Clarence Thomas, Sam Alito, they're all on board with this, basically instructing the Trump White House, and I forget the exact wording, but I think it was
Facilitate.
facilitate the
Mm.
release and ostensibly the return of Garcia, this he's a father. He's married to a U.S. citizen, and there's really no evidence that he's a gang member, let alone a terrorist, as Stephen Miller and the dictator of El Salvador apparently claim. But I guess one potential problem here, Ron, is that if Donald Trump can disappear somebody and ignore a Supreme Court ruling to have him released, then what's next?
Yeah, well, he's told us what's next. He told the president of El Salvador and then told reporters that what he would like to be able to do is to take U.S. citizens, those that he deems to be criminals who hit women, hit old ladies up on the head, and who he deems who are terrorists, and send them to foreign gulags, send them to foreign countries, which is illegal, which is unconstitutional. But who's going to stop him? As you say, the Supreme Court has already said he has to facilitate the repatriation of this American resident, this father of an American citizen, this husband of an American citizen, this man who's been in this country since he was 16 years old, paying his taxes, working with sheet metal, helping his community. Now, it was a big loophole. The day this ruling came out, I said, watch Trump drive through this loophole when they said he has to facilitate his deportation. They didn't order him to do so. And again, it's because the Supreme Court doesn't think that it can tell the commander in chief how to carry out foreign policy. So it's a legitimate guardrail there, but
Is
it
this foreign?
prohibits.
I've heard that many times. Is this foreign policy? I
Well,
mean, and
that's what the court's going to have to decide. You could argue that it is because it involves our leader negotiating with another leader about whether or not to turn over a human being. That is by nature foreign policy, but it's also, extra constitutional, if not unconstitutional, action that the president is taking by deporting this man and not bringing him back. So here's the problem. You and I could argue, even the Supreme Court could say it's not foreign policy. You have to bring him back. The president can continue to ignore him, and who's going to stop him? He has armies, the judges don't. He has a right wing ecosystem that parrots what he says. The mainstream media can't hold a feather to it, can't stand up to it. The Constitution doesn't speak to him. He's not someone who's a constitutional scholar. I think the only thing that can stop Donald Trump, there's two things that can stop him from sliding into authoritarianism. One is Donald Trump. Good luck with that. But one is
yeah,
him deciding for various reasons I'm going too far. The other is us, is we the people. It's going to take, to eradicate Trumpism, it's going to take a supermajority of Americans, which means millions of people who are now voting for Trump, to come together and say no more several elections in a row with landslides. It's not going to be enough. The Democrats win by a few votes or even by a lot in 2 years. They got to win by a lot for 3 or 4 election cycles
yeah.
to eradicate this poison. And I don't know if we're up to that.
Well, I don't think we are. At least, I don't think we are in the sense of I don't think people care that much about the rule of law, liberal democracy, due process. I don't think most people give a damn. And right now, I think a lot of folks just think, well, those are bad people. This guy's a terrorist. This guy's a gang member. So, you're wringing your hands, but who cares what happens to them? They're not coming for me. Well, maybe they will be eventually. But Ron, even though the American public may not rise up in defense of liberal democracy, I do think it's possible that these tariffs and what they may do to the economy could actually have the result that you're talking about. Donald Trump could drive this economy off a cliff, and that I think people actually might care about.
Yeah, let's unpack that for a minute. We've had times like this before on the authoritarianism part. The Red Scare in the 1920s, McCarthyism in the 40s and 50s. And you're right, it wasn't the American people who rose up and stopped this kind of authoritarian bent. It was the gatekeepers. It was the elites. It was the heads of the institutions, the courts. One of the few female senators from Massachusetts standing up against McCarthy. It was the media that had more trust and power back then. The institutions stopped the slide. Those institutions have no power or trust for the American public now. There are no gatekeepers now. So now it really is up to us to say no more. And we haven't done that since 1776. The
Yeah.
American people haven't had to stand up to this kind of tyranny in what, 7, 8 generations. Now, on the other point, yes, I agree with you. And you guest you had on earlier this week, Chuck Todd, that politically, the American people are not going to stand for higher prices from a president who promised them lower prices. Politically, American people aren't going to accept more barriers to sound business from a man who promised to get rid of those barriers. Politically, the American people aren't going to stand for chaos in the economic system when they want calm. The trouble, Matt, is again, we all look at this as if there's only one election cycle left in America. Yes, the Republicans are probably going to get their butts handed to them in 2 years, and Trump probably won't be able to run for an extra constitutional third term. But Trumpism will still be there. There
Yeah.
still will be this hatred of the other. There still will be this yearning for a powerful presidency, a strong man, which is what we have going on there. There still will be this playbook that another, maybe even smarter, wiser, more developed totalitarian politician from the left or the right, by the way,
Mm-hmm.
could pick up and undermine democracy. The terrorists ain't going to save us from that. The long term threat to this country is bigger than this terror story. For as big as a terror story is, and for as damaging as it could be to our economy and to Trump, it's not enough to kill Trumpism alone.
Oh, I completely agree with you there, and I think that Donald Trump has exposed weaknesses. I mean, right now there's a playbook that you could look at.
Yep.
Just as Trump second term learned from the first 4 years,
Right.
someone could now learn, and we are very vulnerable to.
Yep.
Obviously, we are vulnerable to authoritarians. But look, I think just get past Trump. If we get past Trump, then so my concern right now is sort of just living to fight another day. And I'm going to bring up this AP case because it's not just that Trump is ignoring the Supreme Court's ruling about facilitating the release of Garcia. But talk if you would, because you worked for the AP. You were, I think,
Yeah.
their Washington. Were you the Washington bureau
I was
chief?
a White House correspondent, and then I ran the Washington bureau, which is the largest bureau in the company.
And now there's a Supreme Court case uh, that Trump is also ignoring, right? About the
Yeah.
Associated Press. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, if I could just back up on one thing, because these two things tie together. I think it'd be a big mistake if we say, let's just focus on Trump and we'll worry about authoritarianism after Trump. Because if I'm right, that the only way we save democracy is by building a supermajority of Americans who will fight for democracy, we have to think right now about how we make these arguments. I mean, it's really easy for people like you and I, like-minded people, to call him names, to chastise his people, to not do what's needed to build this coalition. we need to learn how to talk to MAGA voters so they'll understand why this is a threat to them. And
I
we need
see.
to do that now. We
This
need to
is
do
where
that
I
now.
think we may actually have a disagreement of opinion. And it's not that I disagree with your motives. I just think that dog won't hunt. I am
It-
very skeptical of the notion that you could have a supermajority of Americans who actually care about defending, who know of civics and care about defending liberal democracy and the rule of law and due process. I really wish it
You,
weren't the
you,
case,
you
but
may
I
be right. You may be right. And if you're right, we're toast because we can't survive unless there's a supermajority of Americans who are willing to fight for this country. And so that's why I think your question is so pertinent about the AP case. I could just stand up and say the AP is a great news organization. It has a business model to be unbiased, which it does. It is the intranet for the rest of the media. In other words, the AP is the one news organization that provides everybody else. I could make all kinds of arguments that intellectually make sense. And I could, I could run down Trump for being accurately run him down for ignoring the Supreme Court and call him all kinds of names. What I'd rather do is look at MAGA voters in the eyes and say, if this president can trample on the First Amendment, if this president can say to a set of Americans who happen to work for the Associated Press, if you don't abide by my state-sanctioned speech, if you don't listen to how I want to control your speech, I will punish you with all the powers of the presidency. If he can say that to Julie Pace at the Associated Press, he can say it to Matt Lewis. He can say it to Joe Lipschitz in Oscoda, Michigan. He can say it to Bubba down in Arkansas. That this isn't a fight against for the Associated Press. This is a fight for all of our right to speak. Because as soon as a president's allowed to punish somebody for their speech, which is what he's doing for the AP, he's punishing the AP because they will not call a body of water what he wants it to be called. If that precedent is allowed to stand, my MAGA friends, the next president could be a liberal
yeah.
who could say, if you don't use the phrase DEI in every sentence, I'm going to punish you. We can't, as Americans, allow this to happen. And we have to learn somehow, we've got to figure out how to build this coalition, Matt, or we are toast.
No, I'm totally with you. I do think that Donald Trump, now there is a playbook that Trump has now created, and it is true that Trump's chaos undermines. In other words, it's conceivable that a more competent authoritarian could have actually been more successful than Trump. I
Yep.
also think, though, that the likelihood that someone will come in who is as charismatic as Trump right away is probably not likely. I mean, I don't think there's any other Republican right now who, if they took over tomorrow, I don't think JD Vance is probably smarter than Donald Trump. I don't think he could command the Republican Party and the loyalty that Donald Trump engenders from them.
I, I, you're right. I can't see that person. But you know what? 4 years out from the 2008 election, I couldn't see that Barack Obama was going to be the celebrity he was. In 1928, nobody could see that Franklin Roosevelt was going to be the celebrity, the charismatic president that he became. I can guarantee you in 1858, nobody saw Abraham Lincoln was going to become the charismatic leader that he was. We don't always see the charismatic leaders until they
Yeah.
burst on the scene. Our history has had a series of them who've burst on the scene in a positive way. But Joe McCarthy came out of nowhere. He was a backbencher one day, and he had politics in the palm of his hand the next. The preacher who used to work here up the street in Royal Oak, Michigan during the Depression, Father Coughlin, was just another Catholic minister, another Catholic priest, until one day he got on the radio and started building an audience so big that it threatened Roosevelt's presidency, and they built this huge post office that's still standing here just to handle all the mail that he got as a despot in waiting. So I don't think we can hope that somebody more competent doesn't pick up the playbook, and especially just knowing human nature.
Yeah.
World history is filled with men and women who came from nowhere to conquer people. I'm not going to assume it can't happen here.
Let me ask, how, in light of the circumstances, how should journalists, how should media outlets, because Trump is going after, it's not just the AP, right? It's
Yeah,
CBS. He's going after attorneys and law firms. He is going after a lot. There's a lot of people, that he's
yeah,
going after. Anyone really who might push back or pose him any trouble.
yep.
But speaking of the media, because you spent a lot of your career in the media, how should journalists attend the White House briefings? How should journalists handle this guy? Because it's like, on one hand, if you engage him, you're normalizing him. On the other hand, it's your job to cover him, and if you're not there, then Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend will be the journalist, asking Zelensky why he doesn't wear a suit. How
Well,
would you advise?
that's already happening. He's already building, has partially built a press corps around him that are sycophants. Um, so one thing I called for early on was before this got so bad, before he took all the steps he has against the media, let's grab the spotlight from him. Let's take from him what he craves attention, and let's boycott the briefings. Because first of all, the White House briefings have always been worthless under every president. I never broke a story sitting in the front row. I broke them when I got the hell out of the briefing room and got on the phone to my sources, or walked the halls of Congress, or start knocking on doors at state agencies. Um, but tactically, there's things the media could have done, can do, to seize the spotlight. But the question is, what do you do with that spotlight? I think the biggest failing the media has right now is, one, too much capitulation without a fight. The news organizations that made a decision to call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America should no longer call themselves news organizations. They capitulated before a fight. They should have drawn a hard line like the Associated Press did. But that's not the call of reporters. That's the call of the C-suites, and they're worried about their bottom lines. What reporters can do is what you and I got in the business to do, which is to get as close to the truth as we possibly can. So when the president is lying, say he's lying. When the president is doing something that's clearly violating the Constitution, say it violates the Constitution or it violates the Supreme Court ruling. Don't use mealy mouth language. Don't bend over so hard to try to be so both sides that you're ignoring the truth. And lastly, and the hardest thing, but the most important thing, is to start reporting about these things, not like a campaign where there's going to be a winner or losers and there's tactics and there's behind the scenes, not like it's a sporting event. To cover it in a way where we can explain to people why it matters to them. We need to make these issues relevant to people. We all need to be writing today that what's happening to Garcia in Maryland could happen to you tomorrow, Mr. MAGA.
Yeah.
And we need to explain to people that what's happening to the AP could happen to you. We've got to make these issues relevant to Americans if we have any hope of making 60% of them care.
Yeah, and it's tough because I'm telling you, man,
I know.
it's the us versus them mentality, and I know they believe Trump is one of us, and the people he's targeting are either, immigrants or dark-skinned people or liberals, the deep
I,
state, whatever. And so he would
you're
never come for me.
you're 100% right, and that's human nature. And I see the same obstacle you do. I'm not saying it's easy, but one, it's our job. We're supposed to make news relevant to people, so let's try harder. But number two,
Yeah.
just in my own personal experience, I live here in Detroit, but I spent half my year in northern Michigan in a county that's about the Trumpiest county in Michigan. It votes 80% for Trump. My friends and neighbors out there adore Donald Trump. But when I'm able to talk to them like a human being, when I don't snark at them, when I don't when I don't accuse them of being stupid, when I don't accuse them of being a racist, when I don't say that Trump is a dummy and an idiot, and I don't go right to words like fascism and authoritarianism, when I have a calm discussion with them and say, if this was allowed to stand, you're right. You're right. The media's been too biased. But if this was allowed to stand, here's what will happen if a Democrat gets elected next time and you try to defy the president. Or here's what could happen if there's somebody in office, in the governor's office or the president's office, who's able in the White House, who's able to decide who goes to a foreign prison or not.
Hmm.
When I try to make it relevant, then I have seen minds change, Matt. I've been
Well, and
able
I'm
to
telling
change
you,
minds.
Ron, I know it's convenient for us right now to say, be careful if a Democrat gets in, but it's real. I saw somebody made a point today. I can't remember who on social media, but they were looking at what Donald Trump and his administration were saying about Harvard University. And based on Trump's rationale of what they're doing wrong and what he wants to do to them, it is a hop, skip, and a jump from a Democratic president basically taking away the tax status of churches
100%.
and religious schools. It's
100%.
the same logic.
Right. So that's what I think that's where we got to be as commentators, as a journalist, is making that point, not in a "you're stupid, you don't get this" attitude. And don't go right to the, as I teach people as a consultant in communications, don't go right to the adjectives. Don't go right to the buzzwords like fascism and authoritarianism. That turns people off. It puts you in a box. Instead, tell a story, help people understand. So this is what Donald Trump is doing, and you think it's okay. And boy, I can see why you'd have a problem with Harvard and DEIJ, and you've been told that they're anti-Semitic. I get all that. I understand that. That same logic. Let me be a Democratic president for a second. Here's what a Democratic president's going to say. Do we really want that to happen? And you're right. Once Barack Obama did some such and such, and Bill Clinton did such and such. But let me ask you: when you were raising your kids, did you teach them that two wrongs make a right? Yeah.
Yes.
Do
No.
two wrongs make a right? Yeah.
No, I did not.
So when you do that, you can, if I really suggest that journalists spend more time with MAGA voters and try to learn how to be listened to and how to listen to them, and try some of these arguments out on them, and then do it in your writing. That's how I've always done it. And it's why I wasn't surprised when Trump won in 16. I kept telling people he's going to win Michigan. He's going to win Michigan because I listened. And I think the only chance we have of saving this democracy if we listen to the MAGA voters more, and then try to, because they're not all stupid, they're not all racist, and we don't have to peel them in any way to have a big coalition. You know, But the voters who left the Democratic Party in the last 15 years, if we get them back, we got our supermajority. If you add the Democratic voters who went to MAGA plus what Ron Brownstein called the coalition of the ascendant, which was never much of a coalition. If we can bring these two together, then we don't have to worry about authoritarianism anymore. And I don't know any other way to do it other than that hope that Donald Trump wakes up one day and sees a light, or we argue better. We make a better case.
So you're sitting in Michigan, I'm sitting in West Virginia, and we're doing a Substack live. Um, and so I guess one question I would have for you is thoughts about how alternative or alternate media, whether it's podcasts or YouTube or Substack or whatever, how that plays into this discussion and how maybe
Yeah.
we can leverage uh, these opportunities to make a difference.
Yeah, well, what we call in my business earned media, it's mainstream media, communications channels that are owned by somebody else that we have to convince them to tell our story. That business model is dying really quickly, as you know. Um, what's replacing it in that space seems to be people like you and I. I've been a consultant for the last 7 years. I've been out of journalism for 7 years. I decided that there's some things I needed to say. So on January 2nd, I put something on Substack, and now I have 5,000 people who get my emails every morning. 5,000 people. I could not be more irrelevant. And I got 5,000 people every. Um, so I'm part of this new movement. It's independent journalists, which could be anybody. There's 300 million potential publishers in this country. We all now can go to these platforms, and Substack is just one of them. That is really easy to use. It
Well,
gives you all the tools I had
what
as a journalist.
we're
Well,
figuring it out.
relatively.
I don't. I would say it's pretty intuitive, and yet I've still botched multiple attempts to live stream
I
this.
I buy something every day, but it's easier to use than the Associated Press CMS. The computer system was 15 years ago. And 15, 20 years ago, you had to work for the Associated Press to be published. Now you can go on Substack and and spend a little time pulling what little hair you have left, and you can publish. And you can build an audience around people who want to hear your opinion. Now, the downside is it's just part of the disaggregation of thinking and the bubbleization of our intellect now. We all now can walk around life without ever confronting an opinion we disagree with. And no one's going to subscribe to Convulsions, my Substack, unless they agree with what I'm saying here now. And so it's much harder than it was 20 years ago to build a super majority, because there's no super communications channel that we all no
Well,
set of facts that we all have to gather around.
that's the point, Ron. And not we're not just differing over opinions. This is a war over facts and reality. And this goes to
100%.
let's go back to full circle to the story about Garcia being deported at that White House briefing yesterday. The dictator of El Salvador is calling Garcia a terrorist. Stephen Miller is saying that Trump won the Supreme Court decision
Yeah,
9-0
right.
unanimously. So and I'm telling you, I'm sure that people who watch Fox News, and that's millions and millions of Americans who watch it just constantly, they don't know that Garcia is a father, that he's married to a U.S. citizen, that he's been in America for like 15 years, that an immigration judge said you cannot send him back to El Salvador because gangs were trying to kill him there. They probably don't know that. They think,
Mhm.
well, they think what Trump wants them to
What they've been
think, and
told,
so
right? But
we're
it's
battling over not just different opinions, but different realities.
right, because we now can walk around in whatever reality we want to. Just 20 years ago, we all had this. The common set of facts was created by people like you and I, because we had monopoly on information back then. Gatekeepers are dead. There is no monopoly on information anymore, for better and worse. It used to be a bunch of middle-aged white guys. Now everyone has a publishing channel, but the downside now is everyone has the publishing channel. Everyone can create their own reality. I would encourage you, to get a chance, Matt. The second column I filed, I think January 3rd or 4th, was called "In Lemmings We Trust." No, I'm sorry, "We the Lemmings" instead of "We the People." I have a theory that because of the democratization of communications, that we are reverting back to human nature, which is to be lied to and to lie. That we have wired into us confirmation bias. And when there was a Walter Cronkite who could arrogantly, at the end of his broadcast, say that's the way it is, we had to accept it. Now we don't have to. So I'm not making a false equivalency here, but you're exactly right about what you said about how everyone's being lied to on Fox News. But here's a comparison, not an equivalency. What happened on the Democratic side last election cycle? They all had themselves convinced Joe Biden was the only person who could beat Donald Trump. They all had themselves convinced on the left that anybody who suggested that Biden couldn't win was a heretic. They all had themselves convinced on the left that Joe Biden hadn't lost a step. They created Democrats, okay, folks who are aligned like I am politically, created their own false narrative, and it
Yeah.
got Donald Trump elected. So
Yep.
this isn't just a Fox News
No,
problem.
I completely agree. It's groupthink. And sometimes, was it Feynman said, be careful you don't fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. It can work against you. But sometimes it does help to create, if you know that you're creating an alternate reality, instead of fooling yourself, you can fool other people. But look, I will say, I do this every morning. I watch Morning Joe, I watch CNN, and I watch Fox and Friends. And it is certainly at least two different Americas. But there are
100%.
but there are legit good stories on Fox and Friends that CNN and MSNBC don't even cover. You would have no idea
Yep.
that
Yep.
is happening.
Yep.
So I think your point is definitely well said. And look, do you? Well, let me ask it as a question. Do you think, are we just sort of reverting back to what the world was like before we had a mainstream media? In the old days when there was like a Republican paper and a Democratic paper. Is it that?
I think it's even worse. So you're right. For the first 80 years of our republic, there basically was MSNBC and CNN, but it was only newsprint, and there was some papers that were owned by Democrats and some owned by Republicans. Abraham Lincoln, to win his first congressional seat, needed German votes. So what did he do? He bought a German newspaper. Okay, we're going back further than that. You know, we've been in that area for the last 30 years. We're going back before the Gutenberg press. We're going back to tribal times when we, because we are wired to follow the strongest person or the person we think is strongest. And we are under the thumb of the person who has the power. And whatever reality that person creates, we all follow blindly. I'm afraid that's where we're going back to. It's the old Bill Clinton maxim. He used to say in the 1990s, the thing about Americans, but it's all people actually. I would
Better to
rather
be
be,
strong and wrong. Is that what it was?
yeah, I'd rather be strong and wrong than right and weak.
Yes.
That's human nature, my friend.
There's something to it.
And
But Trump
because
has
of the
done that on
phone, we can.
steroids.
Yes, because technology allows him to do that and allows us to let ourselves be lied to and to only hear from the strong man.
Well, literally strong man. I don't mean to sound sexist myself, but I do think that right now, um, politics, for right now, maybe 5 years from now it'll be different, but I think you need to be a guy for president. I think you need to be very tall, and you need to be very physically imposing and tough. And I think that's a very primal thing that we had kind of gotten past, and now I think we have reverted back to that
That's part of
for
what I'm
now.
talking about. Yes, we are going back to a primal society. And I honestly, if you really think this through, not only are we capable of having what was the old Ben Franklin phrase, you have a republic if you can keep it. To me, it's not just a question of can we have a democracy in the age of the internet when people are radically connected, but can we have a civilization? Are we capable of human beings of having this much power to deceive and to be deceived? There's no road test for this. We've never had billions of people radically connected the way we do now. And if you look at this objectively, it is driving us back to a more primitive ecosystem.
But how much of this, Ron, do you think was inevitable that someone like Trump was bound to come along and exploit,
100%.
versus how much of this did Trump just out of
No,
luck
go back and look
drive?
it up. Go look. I wrote for National Journal. It's still on the Atlantic page because they're sister papers. In 2014, I wrote a column that talked about several trends. One, we were losing faith in all of our institutions. And when you lose faith in institutions, institutions is the glue that holds a civilization together. Um, Two, the American public was losing faith dramatically in both parties. Three, we were entering into a celebritization culture where we were deifying folks who were famous for no other reason than being famous. And there was a couple other trends, but those are the three
Hmm.
biggest ones. And this is 2014. I said my kicker was something along the lines of, at a time like this, could Donald Trump become president? 2014. And I said, stranger things have happened. And my headline was,
Mm.
could President Trump, stranger things could happen. I didn't predict that he would be president. This is before birther. This is before, long before he went down the escalator. But I did see the conditions where this kind of person, a celebrity who spoke to people's disgust with politics and their anger with institutions. And that's what Trump is doing. You look at everything he's done this year that is driving the left crazy and is undemocratic and illiberal. What he's basically doing is setting a trap. You want to defend the immigration system? Go ahead. You want to defend elite colleges? Go
Yeah.
ahead. You want to defend the New World Order with our alliances? Go ahead. You want to defend the new economic order by fighting tariffs? Go ahead. What he's basically done is taken the social and political cultural trends, and he's riding them. He didn't create them. And that's what scares me, Matt. He's, as you say, he's not even the smartest, most capable man to do this. He is he's very feral as a thinker. It's all gut. He's not an intellectual. He's not a brilliant man. What happens if a smarter person picks up this playbook. Maybe he doesn't have the same feral instincts, but now they've seen it play out twice with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
They could take this a long way, and it doesn't have to be somebody from the right. My MAGA friends out there, it could be somebody from the left.
Wow. All right. I don't want to end on that scary note. So let me ask you about
Neither do I.
Big Gretch, your governor.
My governor.
Joe Walsh and I did one of these yesterday, and we both concluded that photo of her is like worse than the Dukakis tank photo. It's over because it's just so pathetic, and just the context of it. She's hiding from meeting with Trump, so there's a sign of weakness, of being outmaneuvered by Trump, of not meeting the moment. But am I being unfair? What do you think?
So she is my governor, and I think a lot about her personally, and for what she's done for the state. That said, um, she should have known going in there, going into the Oval Office with an actor like Donald Trump, with cameras in there, nothing good would come out of it. Her staff should have thrown their body between her and the Oval Office door, even if she didn't realize the problem was. That's why you have staff. There's no way. There's nothing for her to gain by going in that room. So yes, we have two photos. I think the first one that came out where it looks like she's Homer Simpson trying to sink into the wall is just as damaging as the one holding up the. It's very damaging. I'll say this: you and Joe Walsh aren't alone. I still keep in touch with you and a lot of my friends back in Washington. The media, the political media that 2 weeks ago had her in the top tier, now thinks she's toast. Democratic operatives who are taking her seriously and jockeying to be part of her national team think she's toast. Those are just facts. My opinion is I've just seen too many crazy things happening in the 30 years I've been covering politics, including my governor in Arkansas, Bill Clinton, becoming president, which I didn't think would ever happen, and Donald Trump becoming president. Um, Too many weird things happen nowadays to write anybody off. So I think it's too soon to bury her, but it obviously was a very bad trip to Washington.
Indeed. Well, we were talking about the carnal nature, the primal, sort of primitive nature of politics. Who on the Democratic side, if it's not going to be Gretchen Whitmer, who has potential to survive in this weird milieu?
So it does need to be somebody who's charismatic, who's good on the stump, who can connect with people. It helps if they come from a swing state, and if they have credentials and a history of winning blue collar voters. That was Whitmer's advantage. So again, I wouldn't rule her out. So the question: who has the ability to win in 2028 by 320 electoral votes? As part of the next swing election, just about any Democrat you can think of.
Hmm.
Who has the ability to be the next FDR, the next TR, the next Obama type figure who actually takes his election and changes politics? Who has the ability to be that transformational person I was talking about, who can build a supermajority that rewrites not just the new rules for politics in America, but the new social rules, who helps put together new institutions that survive the next 40 years? I don't know if there's anybody out there, obviously. It might be somebody who comes from outside of politics.
Stephen A. Smith,
Who can do it?
baby.
No, not Stephen A. Smith. But on the lower end are the people who can eke it out, who can win but not change politics, who can win the next race but not change politics. You got fellow Michigander Pete Buttigieg, who I think is one of the most brilliant communicators of our time. There's some really strong governors out there. A guy like Pritzker, who's a fighter. You have a young, dynamic, charismatic, really good communicator in AOC, who looks like her generation. In other words, she doesn't look like me. She's this is a majority minority generation that's coming up. But I just don't see somebody who's really thinking about politics in a bigger different, bolder way, which is what we need to eradicate Trumpism. Is somebody who comes at it who's looking beyond the first election, who's thinking not just how do I win the first election, but how do I win it big and then win the second election, and he was running that first election thinking, and how do I build something that outlasts me.
We could have a big conversation, probably don't have time to get into it, as to what's wrong with this political era and generation. Why isn't there a bench of smart, authentic, tough politicians? Why do they? It's either they seem too polished, too
I,
weak. They've been compromised and co-opted already. They've made,
I have a theory, because they
I'd
come
love to
out
I'd
of,
love to hear it if you have one.
it's pretty simple. They come out, it's like asking why are the Baltimore Orioles, I'm trying to think of two really bad baseball teams. Why do they have such bad ball players? Because the franchise sucks. The reason why there isn't any really game-changing talent in politics today is because the two franchises suck. I think one is much worse than the other. But both the Democratic and Republican Party are rotten to the core, are feckless, weak, two sides of the same coin. We have a duopoly in politics now. I can walk into the grocery store right now and I can choose between 25 different brands of toothpaste, but I only get to pick between two political parties, and both of them have been abject failures
Yeah, but
the whole time I've been covering politics.
those two parties gave us FDR, Reagan, Obama, Bill Clinton.
Oh, wait. Okay, first of all, FDR was 2 generations ago, Reagan was two ago, and Bill Clinton was a generation ago. The closest we had to a big game changer with Barack Obama, but he came from outside the party. He kind of hijacked the party. So did Donald Trump. Trump and Obama, to me, are examples of what has to happen. They were not creatures of their party. They came from outside the party and forced themselves on the party.
Okay, I get what you're saying. You're not saying a third party. You're saying anti-establishment
Maybe a third,
outsiders.
fourth, fifth, sixth party, something other than. I have a hard time seeing the Democratic Party being able to produce the kind of change we're talking about. Obviously, the Republican Party can't. It's much more poisonous than the Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party doesn't have the recent history, doesn't have the moral authority, doesn't have the organizational chops to to build that kind of bench. You know why? They know what the best evidence of it is. The Democratic Party lost twice to Donald Trump. Okay, that team needs to be
Yeah.
eradicated as well.
Why wasn't it? Didn't
We
James?
need something much better than Democratic Party to defeat something much worse than the Republican Party.
I think James Carville said at one point, if we lose to Trump, we might as well pack it in. We
Well,
might
we
as
might
well
as well
pack it
pack it
in as
in.
a
That's what
political
I'm
party if
saying.
we lose to this guy.
I don't hear him saying that anymore, but he was right. Lost twice to him, and so
Yeah.
we think the salvation for democracy is going to be the party that lost twice to Donald Trump. No, it's either going to be a completely overhauled Democratic Party. A dynamic leader comes in, takes it over, and just blows it up like Barack Obama said he would, and creates something new and better. Or it's going to be a third or a fourth or a fifth or a sixth party. We can't. What we have now, the status quo, is not going to change the country. Both parties are invested in the status quo. The Democrats need the Republican Party to run against every election to win by a few votes, and the Republican Party needs a Democratic Party to run against. They're invested in their incompetence.
I still think that was a low blow about the Orioles, but I can't argue because they are in last place. So I mean,
Thank you.
honestly,
But
you are
that is a good
you are
call.
what your record says you are.
Yeah, but we're only a few games in. I think Baltimore is going to be a hell of a team this year, so I should be careful taking a shot like that. I apologize.
No worries, my friend. Well, this has been fun. Final thoughts you want to leave us with before we call it a day and ride off into the sunset?
My final thought would be it's people like you who stuck with the game and have been intellectually honest and patriotic in your principles. People like you are what gives me some hope, and the people who follow people like you who will listen to two old guys talk about politics. We've got to figure a way to do things different because the status quo isn't working. But I think it starts with conversations like this. You and I could not be more different politically, right?
Well, when you
Yeah.
met me, Ron, I was working for Tucker Carlson at the Daily Caller, right?
Right. And I was an ink stained wretch who didn't know what my politics were, but I'm, I would consider myself very liberal now. You're certainly not very liberal, but we care about this country and we're trying to figure out how to make it better. And on forums like this that aren't owned by anybody, Substack I know is owned, but you own this piece of it.
Yeah.
Shit can happen. Positive stuff can happen.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, if you're following me and you're not following Ron Fournier, correct that now. Make sure to follow him. Let me know in the comments if you like this. Should we keep doing these Substack lives, or just go back to the normal emails and link to podcasts or whatever? So
I probably ruined this format for you, Matt. No one's going to want to do this after I was on.
I think this was my best one so
sweet.
far, but part of it's because I'm learning how to do it logistically, because it's asking the questions, and hopefully I'm going to check the audio and the video later, and it seems like it went well. So thank you, Ron, for
being
here. Thank you, everyone, for watching us, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.
Take care, pal.